She buried her heart with her husband until a quiet rancher rode through her broken gate and taught her that love could bloom twice in one lifetime.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
Clara Bennett stood at the edge of her small homestead, watching the last of the autumn leaves fall from the old oak tree her husband had planted 3 years ago. Thomas had been gone for 18 months now, taken by fever during the harsh winter that had stolen so much from their small Wyoming community. She was 32 years old, and she felt ancient. The wind carried the scent of approaching rain, and Clara pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders. The fence needed mending. The roof leaked in 2 places. The cow had stopped giving milk, and she barely had enough preserves to last until spring. Every morning she woke up wondering why she bothered rising at all. She heard the sound of hooves approaching before she saw the rider. Her hand instinctively moved toward the rifle she kept by the door, but she paused when she recognized the broad shoulders and weathered hat of Elijah Stone, owner of the largest cattle ranch in the valley. He was perhaps 40 years old, with deep-set brown eyes that held more sorrow than a man should carry. His wife had passed 7 years ago during childbirth, taking the baby with her. He had never remarried, though Clara knew several widows in town had made their interest known. What would you like Clara to do? A. Wait for him to approach and speak first. B. Call out a greeting and invite him closer. C. Pretend she did not see him and go inside. If you chose A, continue reading. Clara remained still, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. She had spoken to Elijah Stone only a handful of times, mostly at church gatherings and the occasional town meeting. He was a quiet man, not given to idle conversation, and she had always assumed he preferred his solitude. Elijah brought his horse to a stop at her gate, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that Thomas had always shown her. The simple act brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, his voice deep and careful, "I hope I am not intruding." "You are not, Mr. Stone." She wiped her eyes quickly, hoping he had not noticed. "What brings you to my property?" He dismounted slowly, leading his horse through the gate she had left open because the hinge was broken. His eyes swept across the homestead, taking in the sagging fence, the untended garden, the pile of wood that needed splitting. "I came to make you an offer," he said. "I have more beef than I can use before winter sets in. I was hoping you might accept some in exchange for nothing at all, except perhaps the knowledge that it would not go to waste." Clara felt her cheeks burn with shame and pride. "I cannot accept charity, Mr. Stone." "It is not charity," he said, meeting her eyes for the first time. "It is one neighbor helping another. I would have offered sooner, but I did not want to presume. What would you like Clara to do? A. Accept his offer with gratitude. B. Refuse and maintain her independence. C. Offer to trade something in return. If you chose C, continue reading." Clara straightened her spine, the same stubborn spirit that had carried her through 18 months of grief rising within her. "I have little to offer in return, but I am handy with a needle. I noticed your coat is torn at the shoulder. Perhaps I could mend it, and we could call the arrangement fair." Something flickered across Elijah's face, surprise perhaps, or admiration. He looked down at the tear in his coat as if seeing it for the first time. "I would appreciate that greatly, Mrs. Bennett. I have worn this coat for 10 years, and I confess I have let it fall into disrepair. Then we have an agreement." Clara extended her hand, a bold gesture she would not have made before Thomas died. Widowhood had taught her that propriety mattered less than survival. Elijah took her hand in his, and the warmth of his calloused palm sent a sensation through her that she had not felt in longer than she could remember. They held the handshake for perhaps a moment too long before Clara pulled away. "Will you stay for coffee?" she asked, the words escaping before she could stop them. "It is weak, but it is hot. I would be honored." They sat on her small porch, watching the clouds gather over the distant mountains. The coffee was indeed weak, But Elijah drank it as if it were the finest brew he had ever tasted. He told her about his ranch, about the challenges of the coming winter, about the new foal that had been born just last week. Clara found herself listening not just to his words, but to the rhythm of his voice, the way his hands moved when he described the land he loved. For the first time in 18 months, she felt something other than grief. She felt curiosity, interest, and the faintest stirring of hope. When he left, he promised to return the next day with the beef. Clara watched him ride away until he disappeared over the hill, then pressed her hand to her chest where her heart was beating strong and steady. The following weeks brought changes Clara had not anticipated. Elijah returned not just with beef, but with offers of help that she could not refuse. He mended her fence, fixed her roof, and brought hay for the cow that she could not afford to buy. Each time he came, he stayed a little longer. They shared meals, first on the porch, then at her kitchen table when the weather turned cold. He told her about his wife, about the daughter he had named, but never held. Clara told him about Thomas, about the dreams they had shared before fever stole them away. What would you like to happen next? A. Elijah invites Clara to visit his ranch. B. The town begins to gossip about their relationship. C. A dangerous storm brings them closer together. If you chose C, continue reading. The blizzard came without warning on a night in late November. Clara had been alone in her cabin when the wind began to howl, rattling the windows and sending snow through every crack in the walls. She had enough wood to last the night, but barely, and the temperature was dropping faster than she had ever experienced. By midnight, she was shivering beneath every blanket she owned, wondering if this was how her story would end, frozen and alone in a cabin that held nothing but memories. The pounding on her door made her scream. She grabbed the rifle with numb fingers, approaching slowly. "Clara!" The voice was muffled but unmistakable. "Clara, open the door." She threw it open to find Elijah covered in snow, his horse nowhere in sight. He stumbled inside and she slammed the door against the wind. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, helping him to the fire. "You could have died out there." "I kept thinking of you alone in this cabin." His teeth were chattering, his lips nearly blue. "I had to know you were safe." Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she piled blankets around him, fed the fire with the last of her wood, and rubbed warmth back into his frozen hands. "You foolish man," she whispered. "You wonderful, foolish man." They huddled together through the longest night Clara had ever known. At some point, Elijah put his arm around her, and she let her head rest against his shoulder. Neither of them spoke about propriety or appearances. The only thing that mattered was survival and the warmth they created together. When WN broke and the storm had passed, Elijah looked at her with eyes that held no pretense. "Clara," he said, "I have spent 7 years believing I would never feel anything again, that my heart had died with my wife and daughter. But these past weeks with you have shown me that I was wrong." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Elijah, I am not asking for anything," he continued quickly. "I know it has not been long since you lost Thomas. I know you may never feel for me what I am beginning to feel for you, but I had to speak the truth before fear kept me silent." What would you like Clara to say? A. Confess that she has developed feelings for him too. B. Ask for more time to consider her emotions. C. Tell him she is afraid of losing someone again. If you chose A, continue reading. Clara reached up and touched his weathered face, feeling the stubble beneath her fingers. "Elijah Stone," she said softly, "I have spent 18 months believing my life was over, that I would exist, but never truly live again. But every time you ride through my gate, something inside me wakes up, something I thought was buried with Thomas. What are you saying?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I am saying that I care for you, that your presence has brought light back into my world, that when you are near me, I feel hope." Elijah closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. I never thought I would hear such words again. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Clara did not pull away. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, she answered with a kiss that spoke of gratitude, of healing, of the possibility of second chances. The winter passed slowly, as all Wyoming winters do. But for Clara and Elijah, it was a season of discovery. They spent long evenings by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes simply sitting in comfortable silence. He brought her books from town. She knitted him a new coat. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's sorrows, each other's dreams. By spring, the whole valley knew that Elijah Stone was courting the widow Bennett. Some whispered that it was too soon. Others said it was about time both of them found happiness again. Clara paid no attention to either group. She had learned that life was too short and too unpredictable to care about the opinions of others. On a warm April morning, Elijah arrived at her cabin with wildflowers in his hand and determination in his eyes. "Clara," he said, "I have practiced this speech 100 times, but the words keep failing me, so I will simply say what is in my heart." He knelt in the soft grass, and Clara felt her heart soar. "I am not a young man," he continued. "I cannot promise you decades, but I can promise you every day that I have left. I can promise to protect you, to provide for you, to cherish you until my last breath. Clara Bennett, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" What would you like Clara to answer? A. Yes, immediately and joyfully. B. Yes, but with a condition. C. Ask for time to think. If you chose A, continue reading. Clara did not hesitate. She pulled Elijah to his feet and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Elijah Stone. 1,000 times yes." He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, his laughter joining hers in a sound that seemed to make the birds sing louder and the sun shine brighter. They were married in the small church where they had first exchanged glances across crowded pews. Clara wore the dress she had brought from back east, altered with new lace she had purchased with money from selling the preserves Elijah had helped her make. Elijah wore the coat she had mended, along with the new on. She had knitted him throughout the winter. The whole town came to witness their union. Even those who had whispered found themselves moved to tears by the sight of two people who had lost everything finding each other in the vast loneliness of the frontier. After the ceremony, Elijah took Clara to his ranch, her ranch now, their ranch. She stood on the porch of the large farmhouse, looking out at the land that stretched to the mountains, and felt something she had almost forgotten existed, peace. That night, as they sat together, watching the sun set over their land, Elijah took her hand. "Are you happy?" he asked. Clara turned to look at the man who had brought her back from the darkness, who had taught her that grief did not have to be the end of the story. She thought about Thomas, about the love they had shared, and she knew he would want this for her. He would want her to live, to love, to find joy again. "I am happy," she said. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again." Elijah kissed her forehead, pulling her close. "Then I am the luckiest man in Wyoming." They sat together until the stars appeared, two wounded hearts that had found healing in each other. The road ahead would not always be easy. There would be hard winters and difficult days, but they would face them together, as partners, as friends, as husband and wife. Clara thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, standing at the edge of her homestead believing her life was over. That woman seemed like a stranger now. This woman who had learned to hope again, to trust again, to love again, this was who she was meant to become. And as Elijah led her inside their home, Clara knew with absolute certainty that the best chapters of her story were only just beginning. Thank you for reading this interactive journey. What ending did you choose?